So I've shown some activity from our bovine immunoglobulins in virus neutralization assays. So here we have another piece of work specifically looking at whether bovine immunoglobulin can stop the ACE2 COVID binding to the ACE2 receptor, which, as we've mentioned, is the cellular receptor. So as I mentioned before, this viral entry occurs also in the gut as well as the lung, and it's through this receptor. And we believe bovine immunoglobulins have broad specificity for the important point of the spike protein, which is known as the receptor binding domain, or RBD. So here's the first piece of agreeing evidence from another research institute showing that all classes of bovine immunoglobulin, G, A, and M, can bind and recognize the COVE spike protein, the RBD domain. So this is total. So the next figure asks the question then, so if we pre-block our antigen, the RBD antigen, with our antibodies, can we block the ELISA signal? So here you can see that without any blocking, you've got binding, but pre-blocking with the bovine IgG leads to no interaction with the RBD binding domains. This is IgG, and they did the same for IgM. So again, if you pre-block with the IgM, it prevents reactivity, again, with that spike protein, the critical point of entry. There's other published research validating the potential for colostrum to have in our toolbox. These papers will all be available on the ICR website if anyone's keen to look in detail. I just wish to highlight them. So here's a key paper that came out last year, recently last year, looking and proposing an overall benefit for colostrum for respiratory system diseases and COVID-19. It's a great abstract, and it's worth a read because it really does very nicely pose the obviousness that bovine colostrum is fit for purpose as an adjunctive therapy. It summarizes nicely various studies and clinical trials on infections and respiratory disease. And also it notes the role of these non-specific collaborative antiviral proteins such as lactoferrin. I'd like to highlight this very important early study looking at colostrum supplementation in a clinical trial to promote early recovery. So this was a symptomatic trial, patients in the hospital, so having chest x-rays, but they were also measuring C-reactive protein as a inflammatory biomarker, and they saw a change. So the next COVID challenge is, in fact, long COVID. And there's strong rationale for, I guess, the mechanism of action behind this long-term symptom. So as I have mentioned, the virus also gets into the GI tract, and what we have found that gut permeability is increased, and this is common also with bacterial infections and other viral infections. Once this happens, we have translocation of infection. It gets into the blood, increasing inflammatory cytokines and systemic inflammation. And we believe that consumption of colostrum can ameliorate these symptoms and restore barrier function. So there's actually recent evidence now that came out of a collaboration from Melbourne. It's, again, a recent publication. Crosstalk, we want to restore the gut barrier integrity. It's disrupted because of the gut-lung axis crosstalk is defective.
Panah gini lagi sedap.
And the authors found this the severe COVID was associated
padahal yang saintis
high levels
yang apa ni?
Junction permeability.
Sorry, audience, please turn off your audio for the audience. Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Gill.
I'll continue. Yes, so in this recent study, looking at the basis of long COVID, the important take-home message is that the gut barrier function is disrupted and that there are now biomarkers of gut permeability. So we can now measure this in the peripheral. And what they found clinically, there was a higher mortality rate in subjects with higher markers of these biomarkers of gut barrier function. There's lots of other diseases we're familiar with about gut barrier function, such as IBS and also ulcerative colitis, and even gut allergies due to food intolerances. So this is a great paper simply looking at plasma endotoxin, so the disrupted gut barrier. So the disease group, here it's the placebo, has a higher level and non-regulated or a constant high level of endotoxin. But with the colostrum intervention, by between 4 and 8 weeks, there is massive attenuation and reduction of plasma endotoxin to nearly zero. And these were in irritable bowel syndrome patients. And another key relevant study looking at intestinal permeability and the potential for colostrum to mitigate that was undertaken in very, very critically ill patients. So again, another clinical trial, placebo randomized controlled trial. And here they're measuring, as the previous trial, plasma endotoxin, but also another protein called zonulin. And this is a very increasingly appreciated biomarker of gut permeability. So here in this trial, they're doing a colostrum intervention and now measuring 2 biomarkers. So I've just highlighted the key results on day 10 for plasma endotoxin. So it's highly statistically significant. So you can see the control group, 0.57 units, and the colostrum group, 0.15. And similarly at day 10 for the plasma zonulin, again, a 50% reduction in the colostrum group compared to control on day 10 with colostrum intervention. So I'd just like to finish by summarizing where we're up to in our thinking and what we wish to pursue and promote as a novel adjunctive COVID therapy. So there's the benefit of colostrum for early stage protection. And so we want to boost immunity at the border. So as I said earlier, as an adjunct to other vaccine type approaches. So we want to defend the important mucosal surface. And we also, when we look at colostrum and think about what those goals are, we want to emphasize these preformed polyclonal colostrum antibodies, which will surely prevent virus attaching and infecting ourselves in the first place. And as you know, if you stop the virus binding to its receptor, it won't get in. And then just highlighting again the other broad spectrum antiviral proteins, being the lactoferrin and other innate type proteins and their peptides, which bring this broad cross-species protection. And I mentioned earlier again, some key ones. Lactoferrin actually is in a clinical trial at the moment or as a standalone antiviral. And so I'd like to finish on that note and thank you for listening. Look forward to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Gill, for the nice presentation and good overview about colostrum. It's really helped us to understand and how the potential of colostrum for immunology, especially. So we'll continue to the discussion session. Currently on the chat, there are already questions from Dr. Rudianto to Dr. Gill Webster. How effective is the oral colostrum therapy in long COVID case?
Yet to be tested. The likelihood of it working is very strong, and I try to indicate prior art, understanding what long COVID is doing. So I think there's a very strong likelihood. Hopefully ourselves and others soon are going to start doing such long COVID studies. So this is the hypothesis. It's very well aligned. So we aim to undertake a study ourselves, and I know similar types of studies are about to be initiated because it's the next unmet need, and there's no treatment for long COVID.
Okay, I hope that answered the question. Perhaps a bit follow-up from my side, Dr. Gill. Let's say in New Zealand, in Australia, let's say how far this study has been applied, for instance, for COVID, the use of colostrum.
Again, translating science takes time. So we're at the stage where we're about to undertake formal clinical or even single case studies. So we've had to line up our ducks, that's a British expression. So we've established the rationale, as I indicated. There's other like-minded thinkers out there, and I showed that one paper where they were looking at the early infection and attenuating the ICU symptoms. So again, we're at the cutting edge. This is all cutting edge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any question from the audience? Both for the from Dr. Tangking Widarsa, Dr. Gill, along your experience, do any side effect of use of colostrum for therapy?
There are, so we all, side effects. We must remember this isn't a parental drug. It's an oral medicinal immune food, and to date there is have never ever been any documented side effects. It has GRAS status with the FDA, generally recognized as safe. There's numerous clinical trials actually going on in Europe looking at preterm babies being fed orally colostrum to treat their preterm necrotizing intestinal diseases. Yes, it's the safest oral immunotherapy that you could ever come across because it's made by nature. So yes, known, that's why it has GRAS status.
Okay, so another question to you. Since there is a mesenchymal stem cells increase, is there any improvement in cardiac cell healing? Could you?
Yes, I understand. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question, because if the cells aren't circulating, there's no possibility, is there? But when the cells are circulating, I can't comment on cardiac, but I can talk about neuroinflammation. So there are lots of preclinical studies looking at that type of outcome, and definitely there's a study looking at colostrum and ischemic repair. Now, any immunologist would agree if cells are there, they're likely to do their biology. They're very rare cells, so you'd have to do like knockout studies if you wanted to prove recovery from an infarct, a heart attack. Was driven by the stem cells, but stem cells only act with other immune cells. So really, what we're trying to say is these cells are an important part of the repair wing of the immune system. So I would presume all cells help when you're looking at a tissue injury. They all play their unique role and collaborate with each other.
Okay, so apparently the question about colostrum is a bit, people are intriguing about it. Could you explain why we choose bovine instead of goat? Is there any different about it?
That's a very good question. All ruminants have high value colostrum. So our company obviously is about bovine, because cows have more colostrum than goat, but absolutely goat colostrum and sheep colostrum also have similar value.
Okay. Perhaps we switch a bit to Dr. Austin. There is a question to you from Dr. Tanjung Subrata. So the question shortly, in the beginning of COVID-19, many people give advice to improve our immune system. One of them is to tapping our sternum to stimulation the thymus to increase the immune system. Is it possible? Or if it's possible, next time we can tapping our testicle to increase our testosterone. What do you think, Dr. Austin?
Okay, thank you. Maybe if in my perspective, there is the tapping of our sternum is not medical based opinion, or it's not possible to increase our immunity, in my opinions. Thank you.
Okay, so it's not possible. Seems it's not possible.
Yeah, that time is so viral, because they claim this is a double PhD and he must tapping the sternum with all the back. I just worry this is like a pseudoscience, just make the logic, but no base of the scientific data. So at that time I argue, is this possible to tapping your sternum to increase your thymus? Why you not try to tapping your testicle to increase your testosterone? Okay, thank you, Dr. Austin. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tanjung.
Okay. We switch back to Dr. Gill. So it's about autoimmune disease. In your point of view, or based on research so far, is this oral colostrum therapy contraindicated in patients with autoimmune disease? This is a question from Dr. Rudianto.
No, it's not. In fact, that's another potential benefit. So if we go back to the role of colostrum in the calf, of course, the thymus is still developing. And we know that components in colostrum, especially the low molecular weight peptide fraction, have a direct positive influence on thymus homeostasis. And in terms of autoimmunity, seem to have a skewing response away from the Th2, Th17 bias.
Okay. And how about the cytokine storm? Is there any study that prove or show that colostrum could reduce the effect of cytokine storm?
Yeah. Well, there is, because there's plenty of other evidence measuring clinical inflammation. So if we think about what a cytokine storm is, it's an extended hyper inflammation. It's uncontrolled. But what contributes to cytokine storm? It's the same healthy inflammatory mediators, but there's too much of them in the wrong place for too long. So we already know that colostrum attenuates cytokine, pro-inflammatory cytokine, or extended inflammatory cytokine, because that's determined in other inflammatory diseases. But the basis in COVID, I think, of the systemic cytokine storm is the loss of gut barrier function. So now we can add together, colostrum is anti-inflammatory, and it also restores gut barrier function. So the driver of the cytokine storm is shut down, because it's the intestinal microbial fragments, the key one again being endotoxin. It will no longer be getting in the bloodstream. So the inhibition is therefore indirect. So colostrum restores gut barrier function. Therefore, the driver of the cytokine storm in the periphery naturally attenuates.
Does colostrum also affect to the aging, do you think?
Yeah, so again, senescence, another favorite topic of ours. Yes, so if you think about natural senescence and what occurs in that process, there's literally loss of factors in the niche. So if we look at our organs, our tissues, and they're made of cells, as that microenvironment, the tissue microenvironment ages, then that natural senescence occurs. So colostrum promotes vitality and viability. So yes, again, there's another body of research looking at the anti-aging, if you want to call it anti-aging benefits. And again, there's lots of evidence that supports that hypothesis that it has anti-aging.
Thank you, Dr. Gill. Perhaps a question from me to Dr. Austin. We discussed a bit about cytokine storm from your point of view, and how we could minimize this to happen.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe from my opinion or my perspective, the cytokine storm will begin, especially in patient with medical condition or any history of immune disease or immune stimulation. So for the prevention, for the cytokine storm, there is many pro and contra opinions. Maybe we must stay healthy and do an activity, do an exercise, and eat some food, many kind of food full of vitamins, and to make our body fit, and the immune system will work properly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. Perhaps switch again to Dr. Gill. Well, my background is biology. I know a bit. I learn a bit of animal, not so much. Mainly I work with bacteria. But still, I'm a bit curious about. Well, you mentioned in the slide that the cow provide colostrum for their babies, for the infants. But at the same time, we also benefit from their colostrum. How to make it balanced so that, well, the offspring can continue and we can take the benefit from the colostrum. How it works in a company? For instance, I believe they have thousands or millions of cows. But how it works then? Could you explain us?
Yes, and it really is an important point, because no one wants, the calf to be deprived of the immune nutrition that it needs. So I mentioned at the beginning, but my slides weren't showing at that point. So firstly, the timing. The calf needs 4 to 6 liters of colostrum, preferably within first 12 hours following birth. And at that time, unlike the human infant gut, the bovine gut is still open. So the colostrum goes in and all those big proteins literally go into the bloodstream because the gut hasn't become intact. And by 48 hours postpartum, so post-birth, the gut does close up, and that's through the colostrum growth factors. So there's no further advantage of colostrum on that at that time point, because it won't get into their blood anymore. And there's a farming term called failure of passive transfer. So if that calf doesn't get that 4 to 6 liters, then within 12 hours, it's sort of never, you can't reverse it. What they do in practice is, because the calves are all calving at the same time, normally the farmer makes a pool of donor colostrum. because some cows have bad colostrum, like in humans, you know, some mothers have poor quality colostrum for whatever reason, so the baby doesn't thrive. So they hand feed or feed in a device. So they collect donor colostrum, mix it, hand feed calves, and due to the size of the cow udder, there's just loads left over. Literally, it turns into waste because it can't be sold as a milk, because it's not a milk, it's colostrum. And it's a highly coordinated collection process with oversight from animal health regulators, you know, so the health of the calf's paramount, but there's loads left over, like I said, that would go to waste. So really, in some way, you could look at it as repurposing a waste stream, because you can't actually feed all the colostrum to a calf, you know, because it's too much. Yeah.
Okay, so it means the process for sure pay attention to the animal welfare in that way,
Yes.
right? So
Yes, correct.
will not over exploit the cow,
No.
but still, yeah. Well, happy to hear about that. Another two follow-up questions. Apparently, audience quite have interest on colostrum. So from audience Kelly Lai, she said she communicated with the doctor about colostrum. Could you advise her which source or report to convince her doctor that about the effect of colostrum? And a follow-up about that from Tiffany Lai, she mentioned about, she said that may she know why zero, that cannot eat colostrum. Maybe you can elaborate for those two questions.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the first one, just simply looking for a high quality resource and report to educate someone's doctor. Our Institute of Colostrum Research, ICR website, is dedicated to recent high quality information that exactly will answer that question. And in fact, we've got a feature paper currently, which summarizes its role in infection and allergy and also its composition. So that's actually on the front page of the ICR website. So, and there's lots of other recent high quality peer-reviewed publications and some reviews, you know, nice quality reviews.
So about the doctor from one of the audience asked, the doctor said the colostrum for baby is eatable, but not for the capsule. What's your opinion about it?
Well, the capsule, it's the same colostrum, it's a different format. So obviously for a young person, you wouldn't be having them swallow a capsule, but exactly. you can just open the capsule and sprinkle it. It doesn't.
That's the way the alternatives to get.
That's all. In New Zealand, we're sort of bound by very strict food safety standards in the infant formula marketplace. So, you know, it's very prescriptive and no room without a lot of effort with regulators to get an exemption on their rule. So in New Zealand, we can't actually put colostrum in infant formula at the manufacturer side because we're not permitted to do that. But the way around that is simply just to add it. You know, it's a small amount of substance. It's so potent. It's like you only need like 1 gram, you know, or 2 grams. You know, it's a trace amount. So that's like the best advice. And the other point is not to put it into a hot milk because it's a biologic, so it can't be, you know, it shouldn't be at like 40 Celsius even, you know, it should be under, you know, body temperature, you know, if it's added to a milk, a basic formula.
Right. Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? Apparently we have a nice discussion in this session. Perhaps Dr. Tanjung has another question.
Hi, Dr. Gill. Thanks so much. Your great presentation, Dr. Gill.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope soon we can collaborate for the research with our team at the Warmadawa University.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? We have like 3 more minutes. If anyone would like to ask either to Dr. Austin or Dr. Gill about immunology in general or colostrum in more specific. I mean, it's really broadened our knowledge. I see colostrum a bit differently after your talk, Dr. Gill.
Good.
Yeah. So, any question from the audience? Well, otherwise we could conclude this session. Thank you very much for both our speakers. I apologize. Perhaps one more question to you, Dr. Gill, from Mr. Abdullah Hisam Saido. Maybe quick answer. Which is the best to consume daily, alpha-lipid colostrum capsule or Immu4? How do you get this question?
Yes. So Immu4 is colostrum formulated in a lozenge. So the capsule is swallowed. So that's taking the colostrum straight into the GI tract. And the point about Immu4 is because it's colostrum in a format like a lozenge, to hold in the mouth and it gradually dissolves, then obviously that's delivering the colostrum and holding it in the oral cavity. So, if one was worried about if one was wishing to use the colostrum daily just as a protective measure, I would be advocating both Immu4 and the capsules because one's in the mouth and the other's in the GI tract. But it's the same colostrum, different, one's formulated as a lozenge, an oral lozenge.
Okay, that's conclude this second discussion session. Thank you for a very nice talk from both speakers and also for all audience that gave question. I hope that this session will, let's say, broaden our knowledge about not only immunology aspect, but also about colostrum. And therefore, I would like to return the occasion to the Master of Ceremony. And thank you for both speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.